Good morning. My name is Keith Lust. Welcome to today's roundtable discussion on business transformation. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes for people to show up. So if you be patient, we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Hey, Trevor, this is Keith. Could you make sure that you unmute so all the participants can join?
Yep, everyone's unmuted.
Thank you. Hi, folks. This is Keith Lust again. We're just giving a couple more minutes to allow other people to join this morning, and then we'll get started. Appreciate your patience. Well, good morning, everybody. Why don't we get started? Welcome to today's roundtable discussion on business transformation and the implications to what we're calling today's new normal. I'm Keith Lust, along with my partner, Dan Morris, will serve as the moderators for today's discussion to kind of keep things focused and moving along. We've been in the business and digital transformation space for the last 3 decades. So while we do have a thought or two about this topic, this discussion today is really about everybody who's on the call this morning. And so for today, we've actually limited the discussion to a fairly small group. We had originally invited about 6 or 8 people. Thus far, we have about 3 folks who've joined in addition to Dan and myself. So it clearly is going to be a very focused and more of a informal discussion for us today. So what I ask is that, today is not about listening to Keith and Dane's show, but it's really about those of you who have joined us is really to engage and discuss business transformation. And again, as I said, the implications to what's going on us around us today. And what we're hoping to really do is kind of share experiences and lessons learned, ask questions with regards to any planned or underway transformation that you're doing either in your organization or with your client. And then finally explore any concerns that you have about your own work within business transformation. We ask you guys to participate and really kind of throw your stuff out there. We've set the discussion for just about 30 minutes, but we won't cut it off if we want to continue on. We'll also want to make sure that we ensure everybody's confidentiality in terms of who you are and who you work for. So while I do have the names of everybody who's joined, I'm not going to name you unless you want to self-identify, which I certainly welcome you to do, and certainly not identify the organizations that you guys are part of, just to ensure confidentiality. Now, I'm hoping everybody can see the screen that I put up here. And while we did send out kind of a pre-read, we're not going to go through this material. This is really just to kind of get us going and focused as a group. And to that end, create kind of an interesting slide, the notion of there's been a lot of disruption going on in our worlds in the last year, and it has all sorts of implications in terms of how we're trying to change or drive transformation in organizations. And the big implications that obviously come to our customers in terms of their values and their behaviors, the very business model that we're working under, and how does the disruption really inform our profit, our delivery models, even the products and services that we offer to our customers? How does it affect our operating model in terms of the processes, the business structure that we have in place? And then finally, what are the implications to technology? How do we make sure that it's aligned and flexible, that it has a low fixed cost to ensure that it's not a burden to the organization? So this is where we'll land here and start here. So these are kind of some thought starters for us. There's an interesting notion that you can't go back to yesterday, although I put a question mark in here. It's kind of a rhetorical question. The implication being that we had solid processes and technologies and a way of doing business a year ago, and then a massive disruption hit all of us, which brought all sorts of changes into organizations, some more than others. So then a couple questions really start to emerge is, how have these disruptions really impacted and changed the discussions inside organizations around customers, the business and operating model, technology itself? Is there a need to improve or fix the temporary workarounds that have been put in place over the last year? So let me kind of open it up and welcome you all. I don't want this, as I said, to me just chatting. So for those of you on the call, why don't we jump right in? And what are your thoughts about transformation?
Keith, may I interject something, please?
Please.
This is Dan. One of the things that we found, everyone, is that sooner or later, everyone is really going to hit similar problems. Now, we recognize that each of your business operations is unique, but the problems that you're going to run into or are running into are problems that most people will hit sooner or later. And what we'd like to do is to have this kind of as a live, ongoing sharing type of case study. So anything that you're dealing with that you'd like to see how somebody else is dealing with, or somebody else is run into and what they might have done, that's really the purpose for this forum. So with that, I'll let it go over to you all, and hopefully through sharing, you'll all benefit from this session.
Thanks, Dan. So guys, what are you all thinking? What's going on in your worlds with regards to disruption, returning to some alleged normalcy, and then this discussion around change and transformation within the organizations and clients that you work with?
I'll I'll dive in. My name's Jane Summers Kelly. I'm based out of North Carolina, but serve small and medium businesses across the US. And I've actually been interviewing CEOs on just this topic. And I'll just share two common challenges that they've been focusing on. One is customer interaction. They either say, how do I get in front of the customer, or the customer needs are changing. And I have some interesting solution stories, but we can come back to that. The second shared issue I've heard, and would be interested in what you all are facing and have seen in your customers and your businesses, is the supply chain silo needs to work much more closely with the marketing and sales. One 283 million in revenue operation said no longer could they act independently, and they needed, for example, to focus on certain customers that were high value and actually say no to others because of supply limitations. I have other examples, but I just wanted to put that out there and hear what you all are seeing.
And if I could just, Jan, I appreciate that. If I could just dig into that second one, when it refers to supply chain and a better tie to marketing, is that with regards to supply and demand of existing products, or is it also extending beyond that to even what the product mix should be or could be for high value customers? Meaning, do they have to change up their products or services or rethink what they're offering the market?
Bingo, Keith. In that first it was existing products, and we can't deliver the 12 plus variations to all customers because of delays. So what do? And their solution led to growth with what they focused on. They said, we're only going to do made to order with the higher value customers that do more with us, as opposed to 20 smaller ones. And by doing that and segmenting around the table, and I was facilitating, they said, you know what? They have 3 different needs. We could provide them a small, charge them a small service fee for each different bundle of needs. One is lean and mean, one is more hands-on. So that's going to be an ongoing, and that's my common element from all these interviews. The changes they had to make are not just for 12 months. It's going to be something they integrate going forward. But
so it's interesting that you say that, because it sounds like not only is there questioning about the customer interaction, Jane, as well as how do you really provide the value to the customer, but also have you teased out and seen deliberate conversations saying our business model, our operating model needs to be rethought or changed as a result of those discussions, which are, I'd offer, almost more tactical, saying, you know, how do we get better at, you know, delivering value? But then there's a fundamental question around the business model.
No, they have not. And you and Dan, Mr. Business Architecture, would get them there. And the more I research business architecture, I might get them there. But this, they did not leap there. While they did admit the first step, this is going to be an ongoing solution. So it will lead to that, Keith.
Okay. What are other thoughts from a couple other people who've joined the discussion this morning? Other thoughts from you all?
Hi, Keith. This is Lisa Shirk. Nice
Hi,
to hear your
Lisa.
voice again.
Good to hear your voice. I'm going to disclose, Lisa and I worked together on a very large transformation in Florida for actually a couple of years at a insurance company in Florida. And so we got to know each other quite well for the 2 years that we worked together down in Miami.
Yes, and
I won't disclose any more, Lisa.
You're the best leader I've ever worked for. You know that. And
Oh, you're going to make me blush.
No, I'm serious.
Oh, the paid commentary always pays off, folks.
So I'm from I'm an independent contractor. I focus more on enterprise architecture. So I have a different perspective, more from the technology perspective. And So a lot of things come to my mind as far as how do we leverage artificial intelligence capabilities? What are those software components that we should be focusing on that would bring the best value to make our value streams more efficient, but also that would allow us to generate more revenue, create new products, whether they're technology products or supporting more material, tangible products, you know. And what else? Digital offerings too, like making sure that we can do some innovation because we're providing the data needed to innovators so that they can create digital offerings and expose, you know, sell, monetize our data as well. Those are the things that float in my mind. Oh, another thing too is, well, a couple other things. I've got a whole bunch, but customer experience, like how can enterprise architecture and the teams internally that are supporting all these business domains understand what the customer needs are, because there's a whole group of innovators within enterprise architecture that can help leverage artificial intelligence and virtual reality, you know, all those technologies, but they don't know what the customer's needs are. So they don't know, they're kind of left in a closet and they don't know what to share from a technology perspective because they don't know exactly what the customer is facing. So trying to get enterprise architecture out of that bowl and trying to get them more into what the customer's needs are. I could go on, but I'll stop there. I think I
Well,
just
no,
added
that's
about
actually an interesting point. And so I'm going to put Lisa, you and Jane maybe on the spot for a moment, because there's an interesting kind of positioning here. And I'm sure you guys are all there already, but you know, the enterprise architects, the technology architects are saying, hey, we're here to help. We have innovation, technology, and capabilities, be it RPA, AI, machine learning, data, yada, yada. And then we just heard from Jane the notion that, you know, leadership is saying, how do we interact better with customers? How do we become more effective in delivering value through our supply chain, through our products, to our customers? And then on the other side, we have the digital folks saying, hey, I want to come play. How do we start to create a better conversation there? So
Yes.
and so I'm just curious to know what you guys' thoughts are, because this is an age-old dilemma,
Yes.
but it's becoming more acute because we can't just have the technologist saying, just give me 100,000, $1 million, $5 million to go spend on some cool rocks, which will solve a bunch of problems if they're not at the table to know what the real pressing problems are to ensure that the company survives.
Two steps if I can, and I was almost going to interrupt Lisa because it so rang a bell. The team supporting the customer and the salespeople need to understand customer needs. One, it's as basic as having the CIO, or in a smaller company, the technology guy, sit across and around the table from the head of marketing and sales and Madame's supply chain. And I saw how many gaps there were. Technology had provided one thing to marketing and sales and a different solution system to supply chain. And immediately within 23 minutes, they realized we need to all have the same data. So I know what the warehouses need to be doing. So one is the human element, and Lisa probably knows how to elevate that up to a systemic solution. I'll stop there. But no, I'll share the second example, which is we took some of what I'll call the step removed or back office, step removed from the customer people in pairs of two out to customers for a global New Jersey-based insurance company and asked them non-tech questions about how they use the product. Now, okay, this took some money and some investment. It was a learning initiative, but they all came back, 18 of them around the table, and said, oh my God, I've changed the way I am going to recommend the way we do things. So IDEO type solutions. But Lisa, how would you answer Keith's question?
about how to systematize
Well, how do you really cross the gap? There's a divide, right, Lisa, between
Mhm.
tech people really truly being at the table and not being
Mhm.
perceived as the nerds or the technologists that are so consumed with pushing tech.
Mhm.
So how do we start, to that point,
So,
how do you think we can start to really, what do we need to do?
yeah, so I'm biased, of course, but my focus has always been about, um, and everybody's got a different perspective on what enterprise architecture is. Some people think it's like just, documentation upon documentation, and some people see it as, solution architects that are working in specific domains, and some people see it as more of a strategic arm. And I think it's all of those things. My focus has always been the strategic piece of enterprise architecture. And what I mean by that is really being partners, being at the table when we're talking about, when we have all the information, like what the customer is trying to accomplish, getting that feedback, what the company is trying to accomplish, that the enterprise architecture team that are more strategically oriented are at the table to add to the conversation. So as discussions are going on about strategy for the company moving forward, that the enterprise architects could say, hey, we've got all this great, machine learning can do this for you. Virtual reality can add value in this way. And so that we can kind of explain what is available so that we can guide and make it faster to resolve, the issues, instead of, the business thinking about, oh, we can't do that because we don't have it. Well, we can just say, yeah, we can do it. We have the ability to do it. This is what it's going to take.
Yeah, this is Dan, if I can interject a little bit. There's the strategic side, there's the capability side, and then there's the operational side. And what we find is that there's typically a lot of disconnects between them. Everything from the terminology that people use to the concepts of, okay, what is a customer? What does that customer really need? What's their operation really look like? We still find that from essentially a process transformation side, that there's a disconnect between IT and the business operations, where IT still thinks the result of transformation is a set of requirements and that they'll put together systems. We need a blending so that the people who are really going to be using it understand, we'll say building it, understand what is going on with the people who are using it, what sits behind those requirements. And so what we're finding is that from a collaboration, we call it cooperative collaboration, where that really is an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes with the customer, what they're really using the data for, what they're really interacting, how they're really interacting, and putting yourself kind of in their shoes. And you don't find that happening, at least not very often. And so you find things like, the systems are great, but you require your customers to sit on hold for an hour. We recently were dealing with a major bank that was doing that. There's a lot of things where the systems, you have the capabilities, but the way that those capabilities are implemented is really not optimal.
So let me pause you then, Dan, and ask the group another question then. What I'm hearing is the notion of identifying what the real problem is. And Jane laid out a couple of interesting examples around customer interaction, employee experience, customer experience, supply chain connecting to marketing. So those are some of the issues that business is facing. And then, from a process or a technology perspective, we hear, well, we want to be able to provide solutions. And the gap I'm starting to hear is the notion of relevant solutions, right? So how do we make sure that technologists aren't just saying, hey, I can do cool stuff, and the business people aren't going to just say, you're too expensive, I'd be curious to know, Jane, when you guys were doing your site visits, were the technologists participating to hear exactly what is being said out in the field, for example?
At first, we did it with the senior leaders because they're the most often invested in. And then they agreed to do it with a combination, including some technologists. And we actually, in the very first senior leaders, shared a video of an IBM technologist asking pure technology questions, meaning selling, not asking. And we know that the technology professionals have come a long way, but it would be even more valuable for them. So 50-50.
Okay, that's a start. So there are a couple other folks on the call. Would you like to jump in at this point or just offer up some time for you all? That's fine. So as we look forward then and start to identifying this, what are some of the ahas, some of the additional ahas that we've had with regards to having this conversation of transformation? And are people really ready for that? Or are we still stuck in the notion of, I need to survive, and the whole thought of thriving or creating fundamental differentiation in the market or supplanting my competition? I'm not there yet because I've got such a mess I'm trying to figure out that transformation gets in the way. Or are you finding that transformation is an enabler to the conversation to say, this is an opportunity in spite of, but then because of all of what's happening, we have an opportunity to really fundamentally rethink things as we are trying to move from surviving to thriving? Messy question.
Oh, it's a good question, and I'll just take a stab at it, and I want everybody to take a stab at it. There's no right answers, as Keith is telling us. Transformation is a big word for my clients. Survival is what they're trying to do now. And they are seeing that the changes they've initiated are for the better and are here to stay. And all of them, oddly enough, B2B are growing. So I might posit one needs to go step by step rather than launching a transformation initiative, but more solidifying the changes in place. And I come at it from the team human angle. So it's getting people around the table on board and recognizing and respecting each other. So I told a CEO, give more shout outs because people are uncertain.
It brings up an interesting notion: is transformation safe these days? To your point, you know, it's a lot to chew on and it can be perceived as huge risk.
Yeah, and I think that there's different levels of transformation too, right? So you can do moonshot kind of new transformation, or you can do just efficiency changes. One experience that I had with a company was I as an enterprise architecture, I engaged in a value stream redesign discussion. And when I went to that discussion initially, the only people that were in the room were the business team and vendors, specifically robotics vendors. And what I learned, what I encouraged the manager to do, the director, actually it was a vice president, was to replace the vendors with enterprise architects, because they can look at it from the start to the finish and not specific little tasks, but look at the whole thing and then create a plan to, like, when you have money, this is where you should invest it. Let's in these different areas for these different pieces within that value stream. And with a plan like that, it helps you transform as you go, which I thought was, you know, more beneficial than the way they had it then, was just looking at little bits and pieces and trying to use technology, use robotics in little areas of the value stream.
That's one of the keys with taking a process look at different things, because you do get kind of an end-to-end, at least within different business segments, view and how everything needs to fit together. Because we've also found that from an IT perspective, regardless of the technology that you use, it's very focused on individual little functions. And when you try to put it all together, it just does not fit very well.
Exactly.
So recognizing that time is valuable, today we wanted to kind of keep this to 30 minutes. So let me offer one final thought or thought starter here, is the notion of speed and urgency. And we certainly hear that from leaders, which sounds like things, I need to, return to profitability. I need to survive. I need to take an action quickly. And then the people who tend to be involved with transformation are thinking longer term. We tend to think, well, what are we going to deliver in 6 or 12 months? How do we transform our operating model? How do we help rethink our business model? How do we rethink our technology environment? And leadership doesn't necessarily, especially these days, have the patience because they're looking down the barrel of, flat sales. They're looking down the barrel of who are my customers and what they really need. So how do we balance those two so that we don't become irrelevant when we talk about change and transformation? It sounds like, Jane, you've got the leaders talking about things that they can do starting tomorrow, right? I can do a segmentation of profitability based on customer, focus on a high profit, high volume, high revenue, and then double down on those, for example. So that's something that's tangible. But redoing how I think about my technology environment is a more difficult discussion for a leader in that example.
Unless it's driven back from the customer, or their area of expertise if they're supply chain. So the key is for the CEO or the leader of the cross silo owners is to ask, what do you need to be able to deliver better and more quickly after they've answered the question, what does the customer want, which is the first one. And then technology around the table makes some suggestions as opposed to technology telling them about the new ERP.
That's a good point. That's a good point where we're not just saying this is what there's some education needed. This is what machine learning do. This is what you can do for you. But to be smart enough to come to the table and say, this is how it would fit in your idea. Two different trains of thought there.
And then to your point, Lisa, how do I break that up into phases or sprints, right? So that I'm going to put in a machine learning or an RPA solution. And so as a technologist, I'll see you in a year. I'll get back to you. And the business executive goes, oh, okay, it's going to cost me $10 million for a play, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to get in a year. And guess what? We may not be around.
Well, with the new technologies, you should be able to, there's a new architecture that's coming out. But anyway, you should be able to build these things and evolve them within a matter of days. Once the people or the technicians become used to using that technology. There's a learning curve, just like with everything else, but once they're past that learning curve, the whole purpose of the new technology is very rapid development. So the technology is, if used properly, can address those issues.
Yeah, there's a way of, spinning things up quickly, like Dan was mentioning, just to do some prototypes and that kind of thing. But there is a change in mindset when you start creating models, and you have to have the data behind it to feed the model. And so then people change from doing the work to actually training the model. So there's a learning curve there, and there's a shift that does take time, but initially, if you're going to be really innovative and creative and try to explore different technologies, you should be able to spin things up and show some results pretty quickly so you can understand it better and you can see where you need to invest money in so that you can move forward and put that into a more production ready solution.
Valuable points. I was working with a mutual insurance company not long ago who had fallen into the trap just before the pandemic of embarking on a many million dollar project to redesign the technology behind the business. And it was just a horrific mess because it was a big bang, do everything, trust us, we'll give you what you want business, but you just have to wait. And the waiting has been going on for months, going on years. And in fact, unfortunately, the processes have become more cumbersome as people sought workarounds because no change was happening as the big bang was being focused on. And therein lies this whole notion of transport, as I said before, is transformation safe? In that example, it's not, because we can't wait. The business may not be there by the time everything gets fixed, if in fact all does get fixed.
So Keith and Dan, a question for you two. What are you seeing? Are you seeing corporate demand for my career transformation on these 3+ technology to come disciplines? Are you seeing demand for them? Are they aware from companies? Are they aware of the need to upskill their leaders?
What I've personally seen is in pockets is the answer. There are some, we'll call them business areas, business departments that are in fact at that level, but there are a lot that aren't. I think the technology is being missold within the companies. First of all, the technologies, what we'll call the modern technologies, are great. They can do a whole lot, but they're not easy to use. That's why there's a 70% failure with them. Once you train your people in how to use them, once you train your users into what to look for and how to essentially train them, you can start to move forward. But it has to be sold the right way in the business operations so that expectations are realistic. The training has to be both on the technology side and the process redesign side, and they have to be melded together. If you just take Agile as an example and start to apply it to everything, you're going to fail. It needs to be a melding of the business operation, the design of that business operation. That, in fact, then has to be aligned back to the capability needs and the strategy. But the whole thing can be done in a way that integrates everything, but it's an evolution. It's not a big bang. And people are starting to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you my perspective. And Dan and I agree on a lot of things, and we evolve our thinking as well. My short answer is not so much. And some of the thinking behind that is some of the things that we talked about today already. The notion that we need relevant solutions now. I'm speaking as a business person rather than a technologist. So I need a solution now, and I can't wait. And technology tends to be something that we have to wait for. Another factor that plays into this, and Lisa touched on this, the notion that we're shifting away from doing work in IT to building models, right? We're teaching platforms how to do things rather than coding them to do things. And that's very exciting for the technologists because we're, kind of breaking the paradigm around what technology is. But that requires learning, and we don't have 40 years of experience writing as we do writing code and evolving ever larger, more complex ERP or CRM, platforms. We're pretty good at that. But when it comes to some of the new and evolving technologies, this is all new in the last couple of years. So technologists want to go play there. The business people don't necessarily understand it. And so there's a tension there. And that doesn't support the first point, which is I need stuff now. And then the third kind of area we also touched on is the notion of prototypes versus solutioning, and helping leaders understand that it's not about putting a solution in tomorrow. How do we put in a prototype? How do we do some testing, which is not necessarily data centric, because as soon as I use the word, I need a lot of data to go test a prototype, then people get worried and they start to roll their eyes. Another way of framing that is, how do I prototype a specific product in a part of a business to test what we're thinking? That becomes more tangible for people. That becomes results-based and relevant. And while I'm not fixing everything, I'm allowing us to go experiment and hopefully deliver something quicker and relevant to the business.
Yeah, but there's 2 points in time, and it becomes a balancing act. There's we're going to do something right now that's very point specific, which gets you some benefit, but it still doesn't tie into everything. And you need to do that, but it needs to tie into a long-term, we'll say, architecture, a long-term design to see what you want to be able to do is to have everything ultimately flow and fit together nicely so you can change it quickly. That's something that companies need to work towards. It's not something that's going to happen like overnight. And I'll give you an example with RPA. The big problem with RPA, and I tell clients, it's going to take you a year to stabilize a system. And the reason is you can bring it up quickly, but people don't know the business rules. And when these new technologies are all based on rules. And if you don't know what the rules are because they're hidden, they're embedded in a lot of different places, most of them are just institutional knowledge at some point in time because the procedure manuals become out of date so quickly. So these systems, you can put the system in place, but you also then have to understand that you need to put exits in place as you do the systems so that you can then identify what you now need to go and find out and the new rules that you need to put in place. And it's not that difficult to do once you find the hole where the rule is missing. But when people start with the new technologies, they need to understand that it's going to take time to learn how to use them and to learn what they need in order to get the systems both integrated into an overall structure and how to get those systems so that they operate the way that they want them to, with either new rules, redefined rules, or rules that people have just forgotten. And just in ending that thought, in any process, you'll find that if you put something through that process, 4 or 5 different, say, claims, you put the same type of claim through the process and you're going to have different answers come out. There's really no consistency because each of those people who deal with those different claims understand the rules differently and they understand a lot of the procedures differently. And so gaining consistency is necessary in order to build the system the right way. And that's a big problem. And that's one of the reasons that those systems have to evolve.
So with that, I'm going to call an audible. We've been in dialogue now for about 40 minutes. What we intend for these roundtable discussions to be all about is to have the kind of conversation we had today, to ask questions, to throw thoughts around so that each one of us can leave with at least 1 or 2 ahas, or at minimum an idea or 2 that we can make relevant then to the work that we're engaged in our sphere. So I'm hoping that each one of us today are able to take something and be able to apply it, and then know that there's a community out there of others who have obviously interest and passion around this. And these roundtables are really just to share. No ulterior motive, no one's trying to sell to anybody other than the passion and the interest around the discipline. So with that, any final closing thoughts before we wrap today's discussion up?
No, but thank you. And I'm going to look forward to future group meetings.
Jane, I deeply appreciate you joining us today and sharing some of your experiences with the client, or one of your clients anyway. It's fascinating work, so thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Jane, and thank you everyone who's on the call. This is how we all learn, and this is how we all grow, is from the experiences that we all have together. So I welcome all of your thoughts, and both today and in the future.
All right, folks, we'll have a safe Thursday. Hopefully everybody's getting their shots. And I'm not meaning the tequila that Lisa and I enjoy so much. I'm sorry, Lisa, I let the cat out of the bag. With that,
I was wondering if you're talking about me. I don't drink tequila.
oh, please. All right, everybody, have a safe day. Thank you for participating. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was a joy. Thanks for inviting me.
All right,
Cheers.
be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.